Welcome back to part 2 of our conversation with Alan Stein Jr., where he tells us the key to dealing with superstar employees, as well as why you should worry about the process instead of the results. Keep it right here. Part 2 is up next.
Welcome to this edition of Peak Performers Podcast with your host, Thor Conklin. Thor will be sharing the necessary tools, strategies, and psychology you'll need to become a peak performer in any area of your life or business.
Thor Conklin here. We give you the tricks, the tips, the tools, the strategy, the technology, and the psychology peak performers use in order to get more done and execute at the highest level. If you know what to do but struggle with getting it all done, or simply want to raise your game to the next level, this podcast is for you. Sit back and enjoy. Now, what about you've got a superstar on your team and they're putting up points every night, but in the locker room and outside of the gym, they're just not doing what is necessary or not up to the standard that's expected. What do the great leaders do? How do they deal with them?
Well, in basketball, it's easy. The bench is the best teacher. I believe John Wooden said that. As a coach, you have to be willing to sacrifice something short-term, like winning a big game, in order to teach the lesson. Now, at the high school level, which is where I spent most of my time, teaching life lessons so that players grow up to be well-adjusted, contributing citizens to the world is paramount. Now, I realize in the NBA, it's more of a business. At the end of the day, those guys are getting paid to win games. They're not necessarily there to teach LeBron James life lessons. They're there to win a championship. So it might be a little bit skewed when you get to the NBA level. But on some level, if you believe that your best player is eroding your team's culture by not doing what they're supposed to do off the court, you have to find a way to get through to them. And that's part of what being a good coach is all about, is individually figuring out how you can get through to a certain player, because it needs to be customized. The way you treat one player is not going to be the way that you treat another player. You have to find out what makes them tick. So it could be, not letting them play as much and putting them on the bench. It could be explaining to them that, look, you're a tremendous player, but your greatness will be determined by how great you make everybody else on this team. And right now, with your off-the-court antics, you're actually being a cancer to this team. You're not lifting this team up. So you have to find whatever it is that you can get through. And even in the corporate world, I mean, it goes back to, if you want long-term success, you have to focus on the process, not the outcome. And even if somebody's getting a great outcome, if they're being cancerous to everything else involved in the culture, that will be short-lived at best. At some point, the bottom is going to fall out. And it's important to make sure that you get that message through to them before that happens.
And how do you advise your corporate clients on making those adjustments? They've got a superstar salesman, a saleswoman, but just culturally they're just not fitting in. What do you advise them to do?
You need to find a way to tap into them so that they understand that the better the company does as a whole, the better it will affect them. It will raise their accolades. I mean, it's that rising tide raises all boats philosophy. So it's important for them to understand that in order for the company to be successful, that everyone needs to feel a part of that. Everyone needs to acknowledge that they're a part of something bigger than themselves. And it needs to be made very clear to that superstar salesperson that, yes, you're doing a terrific job with what you're asked to do, but you're doing it within a silo. You're doing it almost as if you're a lone wolf or a loose cannon. And we need you to do this in a way that betters everybody else around you. That the moment you agreed to be a part of this organization, you agreed to be a part of something bigger than yourself, which means you need to be selfless, not selfish. And we're not asking you to take away from any of your sales. I mean, you're killing it in your direct niche. But you need to know that your role far exceeds just what you're doing by yourself. You need to find a way to lend a hand or mentor someone else, or in certain cases, maybe delegate some of your responsibilities to someone else so that they can play a role in what's going on. Because, if ultimately, if you have just a handful of folks that are out doing their own thing and are very disconnected and disjointed from everyone else, the company as a whole will stagnate, and eventually, like I mentioned before, the bottom will fall out.
What's the biggest mistakes that you're seeing entrepreneurs make nowadays?
Worrying about results and not worrying about the process, is worrying about, just the numbers and how can I get to the end, the gold at the end of the tunnel, instead of focusing on the daily practices and routines and habits that are needed to get there. Because if you put the process in place, if you build this thing like you'd build a house, I'm not an extremely handy person by any means, but I understand that if you're going to build a house, the first thing you do is make sure it has a solid foundation. That way, everything that you build above that will be there for a long, long time. Well, entrepreneurs need to have the same fortitude. They need to realize that if they're in this for the long haul and the long game, that they have to be building that foundation. And if they're only worried about the outcome, then they're probably not laying a foundation that's going to be sustained for a long time. And I do believe with every ounce of my being that being excellent is not that hard. Sustaining excellence is really, really hard. Anybody can pull that one sale out of their backside, or anybody can have a good month, or some people are good enough to have a good year. But are you able to sustain this type of excellence for year after year and continue to improve? That's really challenging to do, and it's almost impossible to do if you don't focus on the basics and if you don't focus on the process.
When we talk about process here, we talk about critical drivers, those things, those actions that you need to take in order to produce the results. Don't focus on the results, focus on those drivers, those actions that you take on a consistent basis that lead to exceptional results. So the sustained excellence, the beginning, you and I participated in the 29-29 challenge, and it was interesting because I was walking up the mountain one time with Susie, and we were talking about, in the beginning, Friday was so neat, right? It was exciting. We were just getting going. Yeah, we were exhausted later into the evening, but it was new. And then Saturday it was just like, oh man, this sucks. And then Sunday it was like, all right, the end is in sight, and we had a lot of enthusiasm. So getting through those middle sections, where that sustained excellence is needed, what are some of the techniques that you tell your clients to use in order to keep going during those middle periods?
Is to break it down to the smallest increment possible and just focus on the rep that's right ahead of you. And everything you just said was very, very accurate. I mean, that first Friday, we had the excitement that had been built up for months. We had our adrenaline pumping. And then, that wore off for most of Saturday, which was clearly the longest day. And then Sunday, you can kind of see the proverbial finish line. So that usually motivated folks as well. What I'll actually say is, and this is a lesson that I learned also at Jesse Itzler's the week after our retreat at an event called Hell on the Hill. And that was my first time doing that event. And that was kind of a microcosm of the 29-29 challenge. But I actually learned a really important lesson there that served me well when we got on the mountain. Steve Wojciechowski, Duke basketball legend and icon and current coach at Marquette, has been a longtime friend of mine, and he did the Hell on the Hill challenge. And if your listeners are not aware, Jesse and Sarah at their new Fairfield, Connecticut house have an 80-yard backyard that's got a 40-degree slope. And they do an event called Hell on the Hill where you have to go up and down that hill 100 times. And it's brutal. At the time, it was the most physically difficult thing I've ever done, only to be eclipsed by 29-29. But as I got to about rep number 70 on Hell on the Hill, I hit that wall. Mentally, physically, emotionally, I was drained. I mean, I didn't know if I was going to be able to finish. And my friend, Coach Wojciechowski, was about at the same pace as I was. And I wasn't sure how many he had, so I'd asked him. And I said, man, how many of these you got left? I'm dying here. And he said, I've got one rep. And I almost got irritated at him. I was like, there's no way you only have one rep left. And he smiled and he said, I have one rep 30 more times. He said, I'm not worried about anything except for the one rep in front of me. All I got to do is get up this hill one more time. And then once I do that, all I got to do is get up this hill one more time. And when you can focus on the one that's right in front of you, instead of being intimidated by the 29 or 30 that are in front of you, it makes a world of difference. And that actually is one of the things that got me through Hell on the Hill and certainly put that mindset and philosophy to good use at 29-29. And that's just focus on the next play, what's right in front of you. Don't worry about the ones behind you. They're over. And don't worry about the ones way down there, because you can't worry about rep number 100 until you get rep number 70 and 71. I mean,
you can worry about it. It's just not a good strategy.
Absolutely. Yeah, very, very well said. Appropriate correction. Yes, you can worry about it, but that serves you zero purpose. Yeah. The only rep that you can do anything about is the next one that's right in front of you. And that mindset, I thought, was very, very powerful. And you can easily put that over into the corporate world. I mean, focus on the next meeting. or the next sale or the next whatever, don't be looking too far in advance. Live in the present moment. Be where your feet are.
Yeah, when I train with the Navy SEALs, they do the same thing. They're never worried about, what's coming later that day, what's coming the next, round of exercise or whatever it is. It's just get through whatever we're doing right now. That's it. Just focus on that.
Yeah, and our power for everything, our power and happiness is all found in the present moment. And that is arguably the biggest challenge we as a society face. And I know for me personally, it's the biggest challenge that I face, is staying in the present moment. I mean, do you realize collectively how much mental and emotional energy we spend focused on the past, on things that have already happened? We're upset about something that happened yesterday. You guys, yesterday's newspaper has already been printed. There's nothing we can do to change it. So and now it's important to learn from the past. I'm not saying ignore it, but don't live there and certainly don't focus on it. And then we spend so much time worrying about the future, about what's going to happen tomorrow or next week or next year, and worrying about so many things that are outside of our control. The only thing we have complete control over is our own attitude and our own effort in the present moment. And I find for me that the more time I can spend and focus on my attitude and effort in the present moment, the happier I am, the more fulfilled I am, and absolutely, positively, the more productive I am.
Yeah, and so often as entrepreneurs, you're always looking for that one thing that's going to take you from here all the way to step, number 28. You're looking for that, quantum jump almost. And it's the simple steps. It's going from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4. It's not sexy. It's not at many times exciting, but that's how great things are built. Not by finding the magic formula, the silver bullet, the thing that's going to take you the entire way. Start making movement. So often people stand in, right where they are, stuck, because they're not making any progress.
Yeah, and people, and they want to skip over that. I can't tell you now how many young basketball performance coaches will send me an email and say, Alan, how is it that I can get in that event that you just worked? And I say, okay, I'm happy to tell you, but you realize that I'm not going to tell you what I'm doing today. I'm going to tell you what I did 15 years ago, because you have to start doing that if you want to build up and climb the ladder to where I am now. And another perfect example that was just hammered home at the retreat. I mean, you have Jesse and Sarah Blakely, two revolutionary entrepreneurs who are wildly successful in every area of their life. And it was so refreshing to hear that back when they started, how basic and simple the concepts were. I mean, Spanx is $1 billion company right now. Well, obviously, I would like to have $1 billion company as well, but that doesn't mean I can start doing what Sarah's doing right now. I got to retrace her steps and go back to how she started. And again, talk about someone that's built an amazing empire using basic principles and basic strategies. I mean, to me, the fact that the way she built Spanx in such a basic form, that is what is so genius, and that is what is so extraordinary. But folks want to skip those steps, and someone wants to skip over the last 20 years that Jesse and Sarah have poured into their businesses and to being entrepreneurs, and you simply can't do that. But that is there for the taking if someone wants to go back and do what they did. And as both of them elaborated on their stories, I mean, the things they did were definitely basic, but boy, they were anything but easy.
Yeah, they just did them consistently over and over and over again. She spent 2.5 years as a salesperson on the floor selling her product, and she wasn't even employed by the store. She was just there to sell.
Yeah. Think about that. 2.5 years. Every single day she did that. For 8 hours a day, she was a full-time salesperson. And as you just mentioned, she wasn't directly profiting from what she was selling. It wasn't like she was getting commission. She was doing that to build her brand. I know people that wouldn't be willing to do that for 2.5 weeks. Oh yeah, I just want 2.5 years.
Yeah, I just want passive income, Al. I just want to do a sales funnel and then just not even have to talk to customers. Isn't that the way? Isn't that the way to build businesses now?
Yeah, and that's what everybody wants. One of the oldest things I learned from several different mentors was, if something seems too good to be true, it almost always is. And now, are there ways that one can get passive recurring revenue? Absolutely. But only after they've built an amazing structure, or they've put something in place that takes a tremendous amount of effort, that takes a great strategy. They have to put those systems in place. It just doesn't happen magically. So the folks that do earn recurring passive income, it didn't come for free, and it certainly didn't come easily. They worked hard, they worked smart, and they worked consistently to put those things in place. And, again, I don't mean to get out there with too many of the cliches, but it's that adage that it takes years and years to make an overnight success. You hear about somebody that's making X amount a month on recurring revenue. They didn't just snap their fingers and it started raining. I guarantee you that was years in the making. And even if that one specific revenue generator, they got up and running fairly quickly, I'm willing to bet they had several before that that were that they learned from. That was the canvas which they started painting. That none of this stuff just happens magically.
It's interesting. I was at one of these incubators, one of these places where young entrepreneurs go to, start to understand what it's like to be in business and acquire the skills that are necessary to run a business. And it was interesting. Up on the board, it was a very well-known one here in town. And up on the board, I'm looking at it. It's like, okay, practiced and delivered their 30-second elevator spiel. Okay, good. And then I'm looking at all the next columns. There was like 10 columns. Well, 3 of them had to do with the business, and the other 7 all had to do with raising money. I'm like, what are we teaching entrepreneurs here? This is about them going and finding their funding. Now, I mean, granted, you need money in order to start a business, but it's like, what are we teaching these entrepreneurs about actually running a business, making a profit? The majority of the questions that I get coming in every single day is, some have funding, some do not have funding, but it's like, I don't know how to make profit. What do I do? The sales aren't coming in. I've got funding, I've got employees, I've got a system, but I don't have any revenue.
Yeah, they've got it backwards. They're missing they're missing the entire point. And again, I just think most of that comes from a mindset of being outcome based and not process based. And let's skip some steps. And instead of bootstrapping this thing and rolling up our sleeves and doing everything on our own, wouldn't it just be easier if somebody just cut us a check? Yeah, it'd be easier, but it's not necessarily going to be more effective, and it's definitely not going to lay the foundation. Just using Sarah in that Spanx reference, she only borrowed $5,000 to start what is now a believe multi-billion-dollar business, and she's the sole owner. She's never taken any outside investment money. She built that thing from scratch, but she did so with her own sweat, blood, and tears. That's why she's flying all over the country to go stand, at a Nordstrom for 8 hours a day for months on end, and then fly somewhere else to do the exact same thing. She built that thing brick by brick. And because she did that, first of all, she acquired a tremendous amount of skill sets that are enabling her to run this business so effectively today. But she earned it. That's the only way you get good at anything is earning it. Now, I'm certainly not suggesting that anyone that takes funding or gets money is wrong. No, sometimes that's a necessity. But at the end of the day, don't do something just because it makes the process easier. Do it because it's the right thing to do and it's required for your success. And I think if most entrepreneurs had that mindset, 80% of them would stop looking for funding and would start figuring out how to make sales and how to actually turn a profit, because that's what matters in business.
Everybody's interested in success. However, only a few are really committed to it. What's the difference? Those that are committed are willing to do whatever it takes in order to get their outcome, in order to get their goals. If you're not getting the results you need and want, chances are it's accountability. Who's holding you accountable? I've got a challenge for you. For 1 month, 30 days, and $95, our team will hold you accountable for what you said you were going to get done in that month to get your goals, get your outcomes done. If at the end of 30 days you don't like the results, or you just didn't like the system, we'll give you your money back. The question is, are you interested or are you committed?
Keep an eye out for part 3 of our interview with Alan, where he tells us what the platinum rule is, treating others how they want to be treated, in addition to why choosing to be happy happens before success, not after. See you next time on Peak Performers Podcast.